Thank you, Linda. I would echo what you said, Linda, about the impact that Access has, and it's great to hear the stories as well of many different people you've come across during your health-related endeavours.
It's because I taught human biology. That's why mine are all health-related.
Right. Well, no, I appreciate you sharing them.
Right, thank you.
So if it's okay, I'm just going to share my screen with you. Just introduce myself while I'm sharing my screen. Oh, interestingly, it says it's disabled. So it might be that we'll be asking the AIM team to just open it up for us if it's okay. So I'll leave that to you guys if that's all right. My name is Julie Mizen. I'm Access Manager here at the Quality Assurance Agency. Like Linda, I had the opportunity to deliver Access for about 20 years, which was interesting in the fact that I probably learned more than the students learnt, it was amazing the kind of backgrounds that they came from. I'd like to, I can now share my screen, so I'm going to share my screen in a minute, but I'd also like to just pass you over to Anne-Marie, who's my colleague, to let her introduce herself, if that's all right.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you everyone for inviting me. I'm Anne-Marie Caradia. I'm Access Officer at QAA, and I have worked at QAA for more years than I care to remember. I celebrated my 22nd anniversary with QAA at the end of September this year. And I've worked most of that time with the Access to HE team, supporting various Access to HE managers to develop the qualification to license the access validating agencies and supporting the governance structures that go alongside all those things. So I've seen lots of things, and I think my favourite bits are when I actually get to meet the students. Not taught any, but it's just an amazing experience to meet the students. So I'm very pleased to be able to be here to talk to you.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. So again, just to reiterate, Anne-Marie, it is an absolute pleasure to speak at the AIM Qualification and Assessment Group Conference today. What we're going to focus on is access to higher education 2020 onwards, or 2022 onwards. It's certainly changing times at the moment, and I think our priority here at QAA is to support AVAs and providers in changing lives through the Access to HE diploma. Just before I start, however, I'd just like to share a quick quote from a gentleman called Peter Drucker, who's once said, "The best way to predict the future is to create it." So with this in mind, I'd like to focus today on what we could create as a future for the Access to HE diploma. To do so, we're going to just take a quick look at the past, the lessons learned over the last year or so, or 18 months, as Linda was discussing earlier, the current state, so what the current arrangements for the award and the assessment of the diploma look like, and the future state, potentially what we're going to be looking forward to in the future. As we go through the presentation, please do post your questions in the chat box. We'll also make sure there's time at the end as well for questions. On the current side, you can see a quote. I think this quote was presented as part of the agenda for the conference as well. Out of curiosity, does anybody know where this has come from? You're welcome to place it in the chat or shout it out. I'll put you out of your misery. It is the season, and it is the Christmas Carol. So I thought it was quite apt to reference that today. In addition to this, we've also set up a quiz, which will be available to you over the next week or so. You'll have the opportunity to not only test your knowledge on access, but it also provides you with an opportunity to feedback on what you think the priorities for the diploma should be over the next few years. And also what you think is unique about the diploma. So if you go to www.socrative.com and click on student login, and the room that you're looking for is Access to HE 40. We'll put that in the chat as well. So we'll put the website address and the room name in for chat. I think Anne-Marie is doing it as we speak, but we'll come back to it at the end as well. Good luck on the quiz. So I thought we'd start with lessons learned, if that's okay. To consider what the possible future may be for this diploma, we'll take a brief look at the lessons learned over the last year. As Linda was saying, the last 18 months and the pandemic has placed significant pressure on students, providers, AVAs, and actually the education sector as a whole. This is now our third academic year in which providers and AVAs have implemented the extraordinary regulatory framework to support the delivery and assessment of the diploma. Each year, the extraordinary regulatory framework has shaped the award of this diploma, and we believe it will continue to do so in the future. Again, referring back to what Linda was talking about, online provision, I believe that we'll possibly see more development in that area in the future as well. Now, the key priorities for the arrangements for the award and assessment of the diploma last year were the following: that teaching the content of the diploma should continue. This was to ensure that every access student had every opportunity to acquire the knowledge as well as the skills they needed to progress successfully into HE. In addition to that, our key priority was to ensure that assessments could continue where possible, and if a student could be assessed, they should be assessed. These key priorities are the same for this academic year. We want to continue to ensure that students can receive fair and robust results, and that the distributions of the grades this year follow a similar pattern to grades in previous years. With guidance from QAA, AVAs will continue to support you in implementing these arrangements, and in particular, the robust quality assurance mechanisms that will help ensure consistency is applied across all diplomas awarded. So what do the results look like from last year? So this data is brand new in. We've only shared it last week with the AVAs. It is initial data, but I'd like to introduce you to Anne-Marie, who will now take us through the results.
Thanks, Julie. So the data, as Julie said, it's new data. It's based on data we received from the 11 access validating agencies that we license, and is for the 2020-2021 academic year. And it's just an initial analysis. The confirmed data, which will include data from the Education Skills Funding Agency. So that's based on the final ILR data. So the R14 data will be included and collated with the AVA data and analysed, and then we'll join that or publish that alongside data that we receive from UCAS on applications and accepted applications to university, and also the data that we receive from HESA on students that entered university in September 2020. So first of all, a quick question. I don't know if many of you are as old as me remember sitting of an evening watching Bruce Forsyth doing his Play Your Cards Right. So a quick question. Registrations this year, do you think they are higher or lower than last year? So for 1920 we saw just over 40,000 students. So in 2020-21, do you think it's higher or lower? Pop things in the chat. Lots of hires coming in, and you would be right. This year, the AVA data shows an increase of around 2,500 students to just under 43,000 students, which is amazing, and takes us back to probably one of the higher registration years that we've seen. But we've not seen these levels for probably about 10, 11 years. It's a long time that we've seen these registration numbers. So looking at the data that we've seen for all further education provision published by the government and on the .gov website, you can see the link there. Unusually, access to higher education provision has increased. Most further education provision has dropped significantly. It's dropped by around about 11% for further education and skills participation. So round from about 1.6 million to just over 1.4 million students. So access is bucking the trend. Also, we can see that the community participation has dropped significantly, which is very sad to see. And that then may impact students moving into access moving on because they're not having that, perhaps those foundations. So we'll have to keep an eye on the registration data as we move forward. So if we now look towards the results data, we can see that in a normal year, between 22 and 24,000 students are awarded an Access to HE diploma. What do you think? Last year, higher or lower, bearing in mind that 1920 perhaps was a bumper year for awards? Do you think they'd be higher or lower than 1920? Interesting. Lots of comments in the chat, higher than 1920. Well, last year, just shy of just over 24,000, so 24,190 students received or achieved an Access to HE diploma. So slightly higher numbers, but because of the higher registrations, there was a slight drop in the proportion of Access to HE students that achieved the diploma. But we've also seen an increase in the number of students continuing. And that may be aligned to COVID, so more students taking breaks in learning and then continuing their studies, or it could be a reflection of the changes to the provision. We're very aware that the traditional September to July study period is moving. There is some flex, so there's more flexibility in delivery, and therefore perhaps that's having an impact on how the awards are making it and those sorts of things. So looking at the data, we can see 1920 was a bumper year for awards, unsurprisingly, with the change in the way that the diploma was awarded, but a high proportion or a good result for 2021, which just demonstrates how resilient the qualification is, how resilient you are as providers, supporting your students, and how resilient the students are and how dedicated and motivated they are to work through during a pandemic and achieve their diplomas. So let's look at withdrawals. And the withdrawal data is based on numbers that we have received from the Education Skills Funding Agency. So it's based on the publicly funded provision within England. And we've used these data because we've been monitoring it throughout the year. We've received regular updates from the ESFA on withdrawals. So our initial look at the R14, so that's the very last ILR return, shows that 7,304 students were recorded as withdrawn on the ILR as of the end of the academic year. Quick question. How many of those 7,000 students do you think withdrew before Christmas? So withdrew before the 31st, sorry, withdrew before the end of the last calendar year. So withdrew before the end of December 2020. I think it's, what sort of proportion or what sort of numbers would you be thinking? So we've got 1,200. Higher or lower than 1,200, do you think? Any more bids? Oh, higher, higher, slightly higher, 6,000. Well, Jill, you're not far out with 6,000, but not quite that high. The actual number of students who withdrew by Christmas or by the end of December 2020 was 5,035. So it's quite a large proportion of students who have withdrawn. So we're looking at the data, we can see that the numbers we've got of withdrawals for this or for the last academic year, higher than 1920, unsurprisingly, but on a par with 1819, which is probably quite a similar year in that all students were taught, albeit 1819 students didn't have to deal with the pandemic. Just for a bit more context, 500, just over 500 students withdrew between the 1st of April 2021 and the end of the academic year last year. So a resilient bunch of students are our access students, but it's interesting to see that significant drop in that very first term. So lots of things to look at and discuss with AVAs, providers, to see how we can work with students, work with you as providers, work with our AVAs to support students in that very first term. But let's have a look at grades. In 2021, we have seen a slight or an increase in the proportion of distinction grades that are awarded as the proportion of all graded credit awarded. And that's up by about 5%. And we've seen an aligned decrease in the proportion of pass and merit grades awarded. They've decreased by 2% and 3 percentage points respectively. Interestingly, we've also seen a very small decrease in the percentage of students receiving an all distinction profile. So that's all 45 graded credits at distinction. And that's down nationally by 0.5 percentage points against 2019-20 to 15.1%. But we have seen an increase in the proportion of ABB plus profiles. And ABB plus is defined as 30 credits or more at distinction, and the remainder of those credits can be at merit. So you could have all distinction profiles, so all 45 credits at distinction, or anything between 30 and 44 credits at distinction, and the last one, any others at merit. And that's up by 4.5% against 19-20. So, hand over to Julie, I think, for the lessons learned.
Pounding the jar for me again, Anne-Marie. Keep forgetting to unmute myself. Thanks for that update, Anne-Marie. Don't know about you, but I quite like a bit of play your cards right. I missed that game. So what are the takeaways from some of the data last year? There is reassurance that there is a stability last year in the data in terms of the number of students withdrawn, in terms of the number of students who were awarded, and also the grade profiles. Although there have been small changes, they're not significant changes to the grade profile. So just echoing what Anne-Marie has said, I think one of the lessons we've taken away from last year is that this qualification is resilient, as are the tutors that delivered the diploma, the students who achieved the diploma, and the AVAs that awarded it. So we can't say enough our thank yous to all of you who have ensured that students last year were not adversely affected by the conditions under which that they had to study. The other thing that we're taking away from last year is that this qualification can be adapted, can be flexed in some of the most challenging circumstances. And I think some of those adaptations may very well shape the future of this qualification. So let's have a look at what we think the new era might look like for access, if that's okay. So on your screen, there are a few of the political issues, as well as some of the health-related issues that the country is dealing with at the moment. And I imagine we're all now considering how can we continue to be best placed to meet the challenges now and in the coming academic years. So let's have a look at some of those possible considerations that will inform the future of the diploma. I was going to start by talking about the ESFA qualification moratorium. You'll be aware that in September 2020, ESFA stopped considering new regulated qualifications for funding approval. That was for students aged 16 and over, including 19 plus students. And this was through a moratorium, basically a pause on introducing new funding for new qualifications. What's exciting news though last year was that the moratorium did not apply to access to HE diplomas. What that means is you can continue to develop, have diplomas validated, and it will not affect the funding of those new qualifications. The reason why this diploma was taken out of the moratorium or not included was because of the uniqueness of the qualification. The government recognises that. It recognises the robust regulatory arrangements that QAA and AVAs have put in place to maintain the quality and standards of this qualification. And we can see that from the results last year. So great news, you can continue to develop, validate new diplomas like medicine, for example, for funding in England. Another one on the screen is the post-16 review of qualifications at level 3 and below in England. The aim of this review is to ensure that there are clearer qualification choices for young people and adults as we move into this new landscape. It's to ensure that every qualification approved for public funding has a distinct purpose, is of high quality, and supports the progression to positive outcomes for students. In this review, access to HE diploma is well regarded. It has a key role in widening participation in higher education for those underrepresented groups, and it will help support local as well as national skills needs. As you know, this diploma can be developed at a local level, but also can be developed to meet national needs as well. Originally in the consultation, it was proposed that reformed academic qualifications for 16 to 19 and adults would be made available from September 2024, and that the provision should include the continued funding of access to HE. That is great news for access. So basically, access to HE diplomas will be funded in the new landscape. Last week, it was confirmed that the review of post-16 qualifications will be extended by a further year. So there is a bit more time for both awarding bodies, regulators, and providers to prepare for this new landscape. In addition to this, we have the Skills and Post-16 Education Bill. This was published on the 18th of May. The bill is part of a wider levelling up agenda that runs throughout the Westminster government's legislative programme at the moment. The bill is intended really primarily as a framework legislation. It can create statutory powers to allow for change, but does not set out the policy detail of how that will be put into effect. So much of the detail will be reserved for what we call secondary legislation and will be introduced following the passage of the bill. What I think is important to spotlight is that the bill introduced what the Prime Minister has called a lifetime skills guarantee. This will allow for lifelong flexible learning and funding alongside more traditional models of higher education. Learners will have greater freedom moving forward to move in and out of education, and we expect there will be an increased adaptability in the accumulation of credits for students. We believe that this more flexible approach, both to higher education and adult learning, will reflect the true and complex nature of adult learning. It is a positive development, not just for education, but again for the access to HE diploma. There is a credit-based qualification. The Skills Post-16 Education Bill passed its second reading in the Commons. It was a couple of weeks ago, and I think 15th of November. And so it progresses to the next stage of the legislative scrutiny. What we've seen is that the second reading doesn't usually introduce major changes, and that once again is a case here. So do have a look at the second reading, but you won't see very much difference from the original bill. So what are we doing to ensure that the diploma has a distinct purpose, is high quality, and supports progression to positive outcomes for students? Well, I'd like to come back to this in a moment, because this is where we'll be seeking your help. Before I do want to talk a little bit more about the pandemic, if that's okay. And there's a question I think that we all possibly could consider, which is, what are the possible changes to the adult skills landscape as a result of COVID? I believe that adults are more likely to have to reskill or upskill to find work post-COVID. Colleges and awarding bodies and AVAs like AIM will evaluate their offer in response to these possible new needs. So changes and policy are likely to be driven by the need to obtain and demonstrate not only value for money for students and course providers and funding, but also ensuring that there are clear journeys that students can take in order to meet their positive outcomes. Again, I believe that the access to HE diploma is well positioned for these demands. So my last question here on the new era is, how can we begin to understand whether the current courses available are fit for purpose in a very changing both economic landscape, and with the post-16 qualification review, a possible significant change to the qualification landscape. Our key priorities here at QAA are to ensure the sustainability and protect this QAA recognised diploma. It's been around for a while now, over 40 years, and next year QAA will have regulated it for 25 years. We want to ensure that through the sustainability and protection of the diploma, that the diploma retains its robust quality assurance mechanisms and the flexibility in its curriculum design. That's what makes this diploma so important, particularly in the new landscape. We will continue to draw on the unique aspects of the diploma. This is a level 3 progression qualification. It was designed specifically for adults with this flexible curriculum that can adapt and respond quickly to both local needs and national needs. And we've seen that in clearly actioned in the last 2 years through the pandemic. But the other thing to consider as well is, as the HE sector changes, the diploma will need to respond to ensure it continues to provide good preparation for higher level study, including apprenticeships as well. So as part of our role of managing the QAA recognition scheme and ensuring the qualification continues to have a distinct purpose, as we said earlier, be high quality and support progression for students, we are going to be reviewing the diploma specification and the grade scheme. And this is where we need your help. We're currently looking for stakeholders to join working groups that will support these reviews in providing us with valuable feedback. We hope to start running the working groups by the end of January 2022, and we're aiming to ensure the review of the grade scheme and diploma spec is completed within, we haven't got a specific timeline, but we're looking at within 2023, 2024, allowing us to pilot any possible outcomes from the reviews. That is if the outcomes or revisions are needed to the specification or grade scheme. We may not see any changes at all. We'll also be setting up a working group to look at how we currently license our AVAs to validate, quality assure and award the diploma, and what that might look like in the future to support the sustainability of the diploma. In addition to the introduction of these working groups, we also currently have some other working groups that have been running over the last year or so that support the promotion and the development of the diploma. This includes international access to HE. So we've recently been working with AVAs on a feasibility study to assess the practicality and viability of developing an international level 3 qualification. We have a working group, again, made up of AVA representatives promoting access. We've developed a campaign to promote access further, and we welcome any ideas that you may have to support this campaign. We have a provider toolkit now, which was produced to support providers to market their courses and provide information, advice, and guidance to students. And some of you may be having January starts, so there is a hashtag Access Your Future, and I believe that there will be a January starts hashtag as well, so watch this space. In addition to that, we also have a working group looking at the monitoring aspects of our regulatory responsibilities. So the group are currently reviewing the way in which we monitor AVAs and the quality and standards of the qualification. We want to ensure that the monitoring methods we adopt are sufficiently flexible to be able to address possible changes and trends in the landscape, the future qualification landscape. So lots going on. As I said, we welcome your input. Do obviously contact your AVA if you have any interest. Alternatively, you can contact us directly, and Marie will put our email address into the chat for me if that's okay. But I'd like to just finish on, and forgive me if I hope I'm on time. You can tell me to to stop if you need me to, Aim. But I've just got one last thing, which is possible things to consider, if that's okay. And this echoes a bit of what Linda was talking about earlier. There are other areas of development to consider, for example, online learning. It's possible we will see an increase in online provision over the next few years. I don't know what your thoughts are, and I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to discuss your thoughts today as well. And AIM are offering a session as well on their new LMS, so that should be very beneficial if you're thinking about increasing your online provision. I think questions you need to ask yourself around online is, are there any particular diplomas that lend themselves to being delivered online? What type of students tend to go on to online programs? So are the students on online programs different demographically to learners that would study live, for example? So I'll leave you with that one. The other thing as well is to consider is, what would be the impact of increasing online provision on the current education landscape? Will it enhance it? Do you see any risks to it? These are all possible considerations you might be thinking about now. The other thing to consider kind of relates to what Anne-Marie was talking about, the data. We, as you know, there was approximately 7,300 students withdraw last year, and of those, just over 5,000 withdrew in the first term. So one of the questions potentially might be, what does the initial advice and guidance look like moving forward? I imagine we'll probably see more virtual open days, virtual subject taster days, e-support for IHE, online mentoring. I believe social media has become increasingly used to support initial advice and guidance. There's possibilities, and I have seen this with some providers, where they offer access nursing students virtual work experience opportunities. There are virtual career fairs and so on. So a question I'm going to leave you with is, how can we help students make those informed choices, those successful applications and transition into and through higher study? So if you've got any thoughts, do let your AVA know, but we are particularly interested in what we can do as a regulator to support you in those endeavours. The other one on the list, a consideration, is work-based learning. And our question is, are there any opportunities out there to incorporate more work-based learning as evidence to support the award of units on the diploma? One to think about, I'll leave you with it. And last but not, almost last but not least, health, safety and well-being. We're aware that the well-being of our students is paramount to us, and I imagine it's paramount to you. Mental health is a concern, whether you're a student or not, but we do see a significant number of students who identify with specific mental health conditions on an access diploma, certainly going on to higher education. So what is it that we have in place to support students in relation to health, safety and well-being? And this is a question we're trying to answer at the moment. So we'd be keen to get from you any information around how you embed mental health into your curriculum planning and delivery times, as well as your staff CPD sessions. Also, questions like, how do you develop your FE and HE partnerships? And do they support adult learners who may need that support as they progress? Last on the list, things to consider, is progression opportunities. As Linda was talking about earlier, each Access graduate is a story of success. After 25 years, there are so many of those, from Vice Chancellors like Nick Petford at the University of Northampton to MPs like Nadia Whittam. Indeed, several staff at some of our ABAs and QAA have benefited from taking the diploma. So progression is an important aspect, but I want to leave you with one of the tools that we use a lot now is labour market information. We tend to look at it's a bit like, what's the next best thing since garlic bread? If you're from the north, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But we do keep an eye on what we think will be growth areas. So I thought it'd be interesting just to share you a quick bit of information about Derby. and what the largest industries are, where the growth areas are, and what the key skills will be in the next 5 years. So currently the largest industries, as you can see, are on the screen, from manufacturing through to professional, scientific and technical activities. Just keep an eye on that one. It's number 4 at the moment as largest industries. But if you take a look at growth in the next few years, actually professional and scientific technical activities will be one of the largest growth areas for Derby. Secondly, it'll be administrative support and then manufacturing. So we do know that and this is solely around the Derby area, we know that the kind of in-demand skills over the next 5 years are auditing. It's much higher than the national average, so you need more auditors in the Derby area. Finance skills, slightly lower than national average. Warehousing, KPIs, so people having knowledge and skills in the KPIs area. Nursing, you won't be surprised to see that. But I just thought that'd be interesting. As I said, we use this information to assure ourselves that the qualification continues to meet both local needs as well as national needs, and that the content of those diplomas meet those in-demand skills. So I'm going to finish off today, if that's okay. Just a quick reminder, Soccer TV is available for you for the rest of the week, all next week as well. So just go into soccertv.com and the room name is Access to HE 40, and you click on student login. So thank you so much for your time. I'm just checking the time. I think I've got certainly a few minutes left to answer any questions. So if you do have any questions, do shout them out, or you're welcome to put them in the chat function. But just to say, once again, thank you so much for your support. Without your resilience as delivery providers, I don't believe that the qualification would have sustained its passage last year. I think that the reason why we got the results we did, and I hope that they give you confidence that the qualification survived a year of COVID, very difficult period, but it wouldn't have survived without your help. So thank you for what you did and what your students were able to do, which was stay safe and stay strong in a very difficult period. So thank you. So over to questions. I'm going to pass over to Anne-Marie, if you can pick up any of the chat questions, if that's okay, Anne-Marie.
Thanks, Julie. Just having a quick look.
Quite a lot to digest, plus I talk very quick. My suggestion is that if anything comes up through the day, I'm certain that AIM staff will be there to answer those questions. If you do have a very specific question about regulation, then you're welcome to email us anyway. I think something's just gone into chat, so Anne-Marie, I'll pass back to you. I'm just going to relay what's just come out into chat, if that's okay. So the first one was not a question, but wanted to say this information shows how important it is to help adults return to education and get into higher education to pursue careers they want to get into. You're absolutely right. I think for the first time in 25 years of my knowledge of Access, actually it's nearly 30 years now, I think that Access, the diploma, is being put onto a new platform, a visibility within the political climate. I think that we are being recognised as a qualification. When I say we, I'm talking about the qualification, the royal we. The qualification is starting to get the recognition that it's always deserved in the last 40 years. But as we move into this new landscape, there are lots of other considerations, and not only, you know, the makeup of the qualification and ensuring it still meets local as well as national needs, but also what the qualification landscape looks like around us. We do know that moving forward, and this is good news, that adults will be funded for A-levels. moving forward. So how our role is to ensure that the uniqueness of the diploma is very visible moving forward. There will be certain students that will be better suited for access diplomas, whereas there'll be other students better suited for other types of qualifications. So it is really exciting times, not only for this qualification, but for the landscape as a whole. Another question is, do you see an increased competition with foundation years at universities? Great question, Simon. You may be aware, OFS did a piece of research a couple of years ago comparing access diplomas to foundation years. At the moment, what we think is that it doesn't harm to have a bit of competition. At the moment, what we're seeing is that the types of students and the types of curriculum offered at foundation years is quite different to what we offer on the diploma. So the majority of our students sit on science and health related diplomas. In fact, over 50% of our students are on nursing or allied health programs. In the foundation years, it is their growth area is predominantly the business area, business foundation years, but it is one that we monitor. But very much like what I was saying about A-levels, I think that there is a place for these qualifications, whether it's a foundation year, a diploma, or an A-level for adult. I think what's important for us is to make the access to HE diploma visible to our stakeholders. But what's become increasingly important is to get across the uniqueness of this particular diploma. The next question is, we've seen a reduction in the average age of learners enrolling on the Access to HE diploma. Is this a national picture? Great question. When I first started teaching Access, I was younger than the average age of an Access student. I have to say that was many moons ago, in the 1990s. Nowadays, it's an interesting one in the fact that it's a pendulum, isn't it, Anne-Marie? Because the year before last, it was, for the first time ever, we had a larger number of students under the age of 25. 2020, 21, it went back to the average age being over 25. But in most cases, it has been every year, it's normally the case that the average age of the student is over 25. We just had 1 year where it dropped younger. Can say though, certain curriculum areas, we definitely see demographic changes. So business is a good example. We see more males on business courses and of a younger age as well. So again, that might affect how you market those courses. So I hope that answers that question. Great questions, I must add. Another question just come in. Have you seen competition with universities with regards to access courses? As you know, we do have a small number of access to HE diplomas delivered in universities. It's not a high number, but I can say we haven't seen that area grow. If that's what you meant in terms of delivery, have you seen competition with universities? If you're talking about competition in terms of accepting access courses, as you know, each university does set its own entry requirements, and we do have some very strong universities in the countries that take a high number of access students. In fact, at the moment, I believe it's Birmingham and Teesside University that take the highest number of access students. I think Teesside take over 800 access students plus a year, and mainly in health. So the question, thanks for just explaining it. You said in terms of, say, Derby College and Derby University offering the same courses. No, we haven't come across a lot of that. It's possible it might not have come across our page yet. It might not come across our area yet, but we haven't seen any of that at the moment. But if you want to discuss it further, obviously speak to the AVA, your AVA, and we're happy to talk to them as well. But my answer at the moment is we haven't seen necessarily that competition. If anybody wants to shout out a question, please do. But I think that's all the questions at the moment in the chat. So Sally, I don't know if you want me to pass back to you at this stage.